Guys, welcome back to another hair extension tutorial with me, Exam Hair. Alright, so today I am answering one of your questions, and it was how to do a Genius Weft install with 4 layers. So that's exactly what I'm going to be showing you today. It is a Genius Weft install using 4 different layers of the weft. So before we get into it, let's talk about who we would use this install for. So it's going to be for those clients with that thicker density hair because they can accommodate the weight of 4 Genius Wefts. For most of my clients, I'll be doing about 2 to 3 per row. However, there are circumstances where they have thick, dense hair. So for those kind of people, I can use 4 layers, or maybe they're going to be a better client for a volume Genius Weft. Now that we know who we're going to be using this install on, let's get into it. So I haven't done my beaded foundation yet. So let me do that on camera for you guys so that you can see it and see kind of the fundamentals behind that foundation. All right, so for the sake of the video, I am using a blonde bead so that you can see it clearly on my mannequin head. Usually I will be matching that bead to the client's base color. However, blonde, it's easy to see. Same with the thread. I'm going to be using a red thread, but usually again, I'm going to be matching up that thread to that base color. Bead wise, I like a 2mm by 4mm. That's my preference when working with Genius Wefts. They have to be silicone lined as well so they don't slip out the hair. The ones I'm using today are just from Mesh Mastery. I also like the L Pro beads and the Hair Made Easy beads. And what I'll do for you is I'll link my discount code in the description, and then that way if you want to order anything, you get an extra 10% off. When I start beading, my preference is to start here in the middle and then I work my way to the sides. However, you can start here, work your way around the other way, whatever you feel comfortable. I just like to start here. So what I'm going to do is my section width is always going to be that width of my thumb. The reason that you wanted the width of your thumb is so that you can drop that needle down easily. And then I'm going to just take a section that's about 1/4 of an inch long, and then just making sure that everything is nice and clean and even, and that my subsection is even as well. I'm working on a mannequin head, so please forgive me. It's a little hard to get perfectly clean sections because of the way the mannequin head hair is. However, on a real person, it's super easy. Then I'm just sliding that bead up onto my mannequin, and then I'm going to drop it down to where I want it, because you want to make sure that within that install you have fluid movement. So you can see I'm going to drop that bead down and I'll clamp it down 1, 2, 3 times. And you can see when I flip up, she's still got a little bit of wiggle room under here so that I can fit the wefts under when I'm doing that hidden row. But also it means that it's easy to flip up and down and it's not going to pull or create tension. So now I'm just going to copy that all the way around. And what you'll need to remember is as you work your way around the head, you'll have to copy that subsection to the section. It's going to mimic, because you want that subsection here to curve just like that section does here as well. So I take my hair with my looper tool, slide it through, and then I always keep everything high and tight so that I have full control of everything. You never want to drop your bead down low, because then if you end up pushing it back up, you might have crosshairs and that's going to be really uncomfortable for your client. So just clamping that down into place, 2, 3. It's also important that you're clamping down nice and tight as well. So let me show you why it's important that we clamp down hard. So as you can see, I'm sliding up my bead, keeping it nice and tight. And then with my pliers, let's say I don't clamp down hard enough. What's going to happen is that will slide out. Look, rather than this where I've clamped down hard enough, it's stuck there. But this one I haven't clamped down hard enough, so that is going to slide out of the client's hair. So really important that when we are using our beads, we're making sure to clamp down nice and hard. So I'll slide that up where I want it. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. That way that bead is not going anywhere. So I continue to do this all the way around, and as a rule of thumb, usually I will leave about 1 inch away from the hairline. The reason that you want to leave 1 inch away from the hairline when you come here is so that the client can wear their hair up and you don't see any of that wefting. Alright, so I'm going to continue to finish off my beaded foundation, and we'll speed this up a little bit so that you don't have to sit through it. And then I will see you guys once the foundation is done and we are beginning to stack and layer those 4 different weft rows. Alright, I am on my last bead now. One question I always get asked when I'm teaching is how many beads do I use per row? Usually on average I'm using about 15 beads per row. Obviously if it's a mini row you're going to be using less, but if you're doing a long horseshoe row like this, it's going to be about 15 beads. So I always prep a lot on my looper. This looper tool is amazing, so it's going to be longer than your average looper tool. It's from Hair Made Easy and honestly it's amazing. I use their pliers as well a lot. So these pliers that I'm using, these are also Hair Made Easy. I only advertise stuff that I genuinely love and genuinely use, and Hair Made Easy is one of those brands that I find myself coming back to over and over again, and I've actually been using them since I first ever started doing hair extensions, which was about 13 years ago. So yeah, highly recommend. All right, so now that is my beaded foundation. She's all done, prepped and ready for her install. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna flip up the beads and then I'll begin stacking and layering those wefts. What I'm gonna do is I will do 2 underneath and then 2 on top, because I wanted to show you how I would use 4 rows of weft, which would usually be with a hidden row. You can do it as a standard placement as well, but where I'm layering so many on there, I wanna distribute the weight of those wefts. So that's why I opt to do it both under the bead and over the bead. All right, so I'm going to flip up my beads now. So I'm just going to flip these up with my comb. Make sure I don't have any little crosshairs in there. I feel like the neater you can keep it through all the stages, the easier it's going to be for you to install. So now I'm going to flip these ones. With my comb, you can see I'm just kind of like making sure there's no little hairs underneath there. These gold clips are also from Elle Pro. I love them, but I actually just found a huge bag of them. I linked them in my Amazon storefront, and it's a huge bag of them for, I think, $8. So they're linked in my storefront too. All right, this is my first layer. It's going to be the longest. So that is the one that I'm going to start with and bring it all the way around. All right, so I'm starting with my longest piece and I am stacking that underneath and bringing it all the way around. And what you can see is I'm going to have a little bit of hangover, which is fine, because what we'll do is we will fold that back at the end. So what now I'm doing is going in with gold clips, those little Elle Pro ones that I was talking about earlier, and I'm putting them in every other pocket. The reason that I'm using so many clips is because I like to make sure that everything is really nice and secure, and it's going to stay up high and tight underneath that bead. What will happen is if I don't do enough clips like that, then sometimes those Genius Wefts can slip down and it makes it really difficult when I'm sewing. So now I'm going to go in with that second layer, and what you can see is I'm setting that back a little bit. So it's going to actually start on that third bead. The reason that I set it back like that is because you will notice that with most clients, the finest areas on their head is always going to be towards the front. So for that reason, I don't want to put too much weight around the front of their hair. I like to keep it back further, so then I am making sure that it can accommodate the weight of that weft. So now that I've pinned that all into place, I'm going to begin by flipping down those beads, and then you can see I'm just adjusting everything before I do that to make sure that it's nice and secure. So flipping down those beads, and what I'll do is I make sure that they lie nice and flush, and then I'll go in with a little clip to secure it and lock it into place. This step takes a little bit longer, but it's fine. That's why I charge more for a hidden row, because you can see that there's more steps that go into it. So for example, for a standard row, I usually charge $150, but for a hidden row, I usually charge $300 for that first time install. So $300 per row. So once I've finished clipping everything into place and I'm happy with how it looks, that's when I can go in with that third layer of weft. So with my third layer of weft, I am still making sure that I am staggering it back, just like what I did with that second one. And I'm actually going to meet it up with that second layer. So you can see again, I'm starting it 3 beads back. If you are worried that it's going to be too heavy or feel too bulky, you can set it back a little bit more. You could even set it back 4 beads. But for the sake of my mannequin, she has enough hair to support it. So I am just making sure it is lining up with that weft that's underneath it. So now that I've done my third layer, we are doing 4 layers. So I will go in with that 4th and final layer. And what I'm doing with this 4th and final layer is I'm bringing it further forward than the 2 underneath that. So I will bring it back to that second bead. I'm not bringing it all the way forward because, again, we need to remember that part of the hair is the most delicate, the most fragile. A lot of the time it is lower density. So we don't want to overweigh those areas of the hair. If you notice damage with wefts, a lot of the time it's because the weight of the wefts is too heavy for the hair to accommodate. So I would be so worried to bring those wefts too far forward and have all 4 layers in that area, because it would be so concentrated, it would be so heavy, and it would be really bulky at the corners. I like to keep it as flat, flush, comfortable, and damage free as possible. Okay, so now that everything is pinned into place, that's when I'm going to start stitching. I'm using a single thread. You guys know, if you've seen my other videos, I love using a single thread when I'm working with Genius Wefts. And the way that we anchor it onto our foundation is through that first bead. So one question I always get asked is, can I do move ups even though I'm doing this? Yes, absolutely you can. You can still do a move up. So now I'm dropping my needle down through that first pocket and I'm wrapping the thread around my needle 2 times, and then I'm going to pull that thread and needle up to secure, and you'll see I've created a little mini knot. Then remember, we had those little edges that were overhanging. Now I'm going to begin folding them back. So I'll fold it back, and with my pliers I just pinch it to make sure that it's lying nice and flush, and then with the clip I'm just going to lock it down into place. With your clips you can remove them as you sew, and that's exactly what you'll see me doing so that they don't get in the way. So again, dropping my needle down again through that first pocket, but this time I'm making sure that I'm picking up the 2 layers of weft and then doing that little double knot, and that's going to secure those corners really, really nicely. Now I'm going in with my stitches, blanket stitches all the way, and what you'll notice I did here is I just went under the weft. The reason that I did that is because I want to make sure that those stitches at their anchoring points are nice and close together and they're not too spread apart, so it's less likely for them to get snagged in a comb. I'm dropping my needle down through that second pocket, and when you're dropping it down the pocket, you're dropping it down and under the wefts and making sure that you're catching all of those layers. So here we're moving on to a more difficult part. What I always see people struggle with your Genius Wefts, especially because you've got multiple layers, is making sure that you're catching all of those layers with those stitches. It's the worst thing ever when you finish your install and you flip up your weft and you're like, oh my gosh, I have missed so many layers. So it's really important that you're cross-checking throughout to make sure that you're catching all the layers. Something that I'll also do is I will count. So I'll know exactly how many layers I should be picking up. I know in that moment if there'll be 2, if there's 3, if there's 4. So now I know in this area here, I will be picking up 4 wefts with those stitches, and I will have 2 underneath and I'll have 2 on top. So I always make sure that I am looking and I'm cross-checking and I'm making sure that I'm picking up all the layers. Something that I also do when I'm doing my stitches is I not only drop that stitch down through the pocket, but I also do an extra stitch in the middle. So in between those pockets of hair, through or under the wefts only, like what you can see here is I am doing an extra stitch to make sure that I am bringing all of those wefts and securing them together, because we are also sewing the wefts together as well as sewing them onto the foundation. So now you can see I'm coming towards the end of that install and I am doing those blanket stitches all the way to the end. And another thing that you would see me do throughout is as I come to the finishing little layer of each layer of weft, I'll go in, drop my needle down under the wefts, and I'll do one little wrap around the needle. That just creates a little knot to make sure that through the duration of the wear, those wefts are all locked in and none of those little layers are going to come loose or stick out or annoy the client. And then I am going to start my anchor stitch. So the way that I started is the way that I finish. I'm dropping my needle down through that pocket, wrapping the thread around the needle 2 times and pulling up to secure. And then what I'm going to do is that little hangover, I will fold that back on itself. The reason that I do that in this moment and not at the very start is because as you're sewing, what you'll notice is your wefts will shift and they will stretch. So I found that if I was folding it over prematurely, then what would happen is I'd come to the end of that corner and I'd have too much weft and it wouldn't meet up with my foundation, and then it would be more inclined to stick out or annoy the client. So that's why I do it at this point here. So again, dropping my needle down through that pocket, wrapping the thread around the needle 2 times and pulling up to secure. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just going back on myself to make sure that that little piece that I folded over is going to be incorporated with all the other layers and wefts. So this is just going to be what's called a closed blanket stitch, because I'm just going back on myself. Blanket stitches are fundamental to wefts, and it is the one stitch that you're going to use throughout every single weft install, regardless of what type of weft it is. One thing that you always want to make sure you're doing with your blanket stitches is pulling up to secure, because you want to make sure that those stitches are sitting nice and securely on top of the spine of the weft. And then what I'm going to do now is I am going to do a blanket stitch, and I am going to then wrap my thread around my needle 3 times to create a little slip knot. And these are going to be my finishing stitches now. So I've done a slip knot, wrapped the thread around my needle 3 times, and that's just created a triple knot. I'll do this one more time just above the bead, not through the bead, but above it, underneath those spines of weft. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my needle down under those 2 layers that are sat on top. And then I'm going to flip up those wefts, because now I need to make sure that I am starting it and finishing it securely. What I would find is if I didn't do this extra step, then I might have problems with unraveling, because a single thread, sometimes that can happen, the knots aren't as secure. So I'll drop my needle down through that bead, and then I'm going to clamp it shut. And this makes sure that everything is perfect, it's exactly where it should be, and it's not going to unravel during the duration of the wear. Again, it's all about troubleshooting, right? And it's about choosing ways and pivoting how you do it to make sure that it's going to stand the duration of the wear. Okay, this looks so good. I know the colors are really, really funky, but I wanted to use different colors just so that you could see the different layers. And then this is just a cross check, which I do at the end of every single weft install. And all I'm doing is making sure that I don't have any little crosshairs caught in those stitches. And you can see that is going to be that beautiful, gorgeous hidden row, which everybody always asks for when it comes to Genius Wefts. And honestly, it is my favorite way to utilize a Genius Weft, because I personally just think it looks so seamless, and it makes your client be able to wear those ponytails without seeing any of those beads. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video helped you. It was something that someone had requested in the comments. So if there is another video that you want me to make, leave it in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Bye. Like, subscribe, hit the notification button. Bye.
What are you doing? Sweet.